Welcome to my channel. Try to hear the latest story.
I'm Chester, 32 years old, and what I'm about to tell you still keeps me up at night. I inherited a charming second home from my grandparents just outside Boston, a place filled with childhood memories. My life in Chicago, as a financial analyst, was going perfectly until that fateful day I visited the property with Taylor from Better Homes Realty. I hadn't spoken to my sister Natalie in 2 years, which is why finding her there turned my world upside down. Before I dive into this family nightmare, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, hit that like button, and subscribe to hear more stories that prove family drama hits differently. Growing up in Boston shaped me in ways I'm still discovering. My father, Harold, worked as a plumber, putting in 60-hour weeks to keep our family afloat. Mom, Diane, was a dedicated nurse at Massachusetts General, often taking night shifts to help with college funds for my sister and me. We weren't rich by any means, but my parents made sure we never went without the essentials. That middle-class upbringing taught me the value of hard work and financial security, lessons I took seriously. Natalie is 4 years younger than me, and growing up, we were actually close. She was my shadow during our childhood years, following me around and wanting to do everything I did. I taught her how to ride a bike, helped her with math homework, and even intimidated a boy who made her cry in 7th grade. There was a time when I thought nothing could come between us, but people change. As we entered our 20s, our paths diverged significantly. While I focused on building a career and financial stability, Natalie seemed to drift. She dropped out of community college after 1 semester, cycled through a series of retail jobs, and developed a pattern of needing bailouts for everything from rent to car repairs. The house that now stood at the center of our conflict was a beautiful 3-bedroom colonial in Lexington, about 20 minutes outside Boston proper. My grandparents, Martin and Eleanor Davidson, had purchased it in the 1970s and lived there until they passed within months of each other 5 years ago. The property sat on half an acre with mature maple trees that turned brilliant orange every fall. Inside, hardwood floors ran throughout, with built-in bookshelves in the living room and a kitchen with the original farmhouse sink my grandmother refused to replace despite multiple renovations. That house was my second home growing up. While Natalie spent most weekends with friends as a teenager, I often stayed with Grandma and Grandpa, helping with yard work, learning to make Grandma's famous apple pie, and listening to Grandpa's stories about his time in the Navy. Those weekends created a special bond between us. When they passed, the reading of the will surprised everyone. While most assets were split evenly, they specifically left the house to me. Their lawyer explained that they wanted someone who would appreciate its history to have it. Natalie seemed fine with this arrangement at the time. She was recently married to Kevin, and they were planning to move to Connecticut for his new job. After graduating with a finance degree from Boston College, I landed a job with Meridian Financial Group in Chicago. The position offered excellent growth potential, and I threw myself into building my career. 6 years of 14-hour days and sacrificed weekends had paid off. I was now a senior financial analyst with a comfortable salary and growing investment portfolio. My life in Chicago had taken root. I had a downtown condo with views of Lake Michigan, a close circle of friends, and had been dating Melissa for almost 2 years. She was a pediatric nurse with a sharp wit and kind heart, and we had recently started discussing marriage. My plan was to propose on our upcoming vacation to Hawaii. With my life firmly established in Chicago, the house in Lexington sat empty for several years. I visited occasionally, hired a service to maintain the lawn, and kept the utilities on. The property taxes and upkeep were becoming a significant expense, and I finally decided that renting it out made the most financial sense. The additional income would accelerate my savings for a bigger place for Melissa and me, and the tax benefits were substantial. The growing distance between Natalie and me wasn't just geographical. After her marriage to Kevin fell apart 3 years ago, she seemed to spiral. Our conversations became increasingly tense, always ending with implied requests for money. I tried to help initially, covering her rent for 2 months, paying to fix her car, sending money for groceries, but the requests never stopped coming. The breaking point came during a Christmas visit 2 years ago. I discovered she had opened a credit card in my name and racked up over $8,000 in debt. When confronted, she became defensive, claiming she was planning to pay it back and that I owed her because I got the house. Our parents sided with her, saying I should forgive the debt since I was doing so well. I paid off the card to protect my credit score but cut off financial support after that. Our communications dwindled to obligatory birthday texts, and eventually, nothing. My parents kept me minimally updated on her life. Mentions of her struggling to find steady work, moving to a smaller apartment. I sent gifts to her children on their birthdays and Christmas, but Natalie never acknowledged them. I tried to maintain a relationship with my niece and nephews, but Natalie made it difficult. Eventually, I respected the distance she seemed to want. So when I finally decided to rent out the Lexington house, Natalie was the furthest thing from my mind. I researched property management companies in the area and settled on Better Homes Realty. After several phone consultations, I scheduled a visit to meet their representative and prepare the property for rental. Little did I know that visit would reopen wounds I thought had long since healed. The morning of my discovery dawned bright and clear, a perfect New England spring day. I had flown in from Chicago the night before, staying at a hotel near the airport. My meeting with Taylor Wilson from Better Homes Realty was scheduled for 10 o'clock at the property. I arrived early, planning to do a quick walkthrough before she got there. Taylor arrived exactly on time, driving a well-maintained Audi with the company logo on the door. She was professional and friendly, in her mid-40s with a no-nonsense attitude that I appreciated. The rental market in this area is very strong, she explained as we walked from our cars to the front path. Properties like this typically rent within 2 weeks of listing. That's when I noticed the first sign that something wasn't right. The lawn was neatly mowed, and spring flowers had been planted in the beds along the front walk, pansies and tulips in full bloom. I hadn't arranged for any landscaping beyond the basic lawn maintenance. "Did your company do some gardening already?" I asked Taylor. She looked confused. "No, we wouldn't do that without authorization. Perhaps a neighbor pitched in?" Then I spotted a red tricycle partially hidden behind a bush, and a child-sized basketball hoop set up on the edge of the driveway. "That's odd," I said, my pace slowing as confusion set in. "There shouldn't be any children's toys here." As we approached the front door, I heard it. The unmistakable sound of a television playing inside, and children's laughter. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. I tried my key in the lock, but it wouldn't turn. The locks had been changed. I rang the doorbell, exchanging a concerned glance with Taylor. After a moment, footsteps approached. The door swung open, and there stood my sister Natalie. She looked different from when I'd last seen her. Her once short hair now fell past her shoulders, and she'd lost weight. She wore yoga pants and a faded Boston Red Sox t-shirt. For a moment, we just stared at each other in shock. "Chester?" she said, her voice rising in surprise. "What are you doing here?" "What am I doing here?" I repeated incredulously. "This is my house. What are you doing here?" Behind her, I could see into the living room. My grandparents' furniture was still there, but rearranged. Toys were scattered across the floor, and a cartoon played on a television that hadn't been there when I last visited. A small child, my nephew Tyler, now about 4 years old, peeked around the corner. "Oh," Natalie said, recovering quickly and forcing a casual tone. "We've been living here for a while now. Mom and Dad didn't tell you?" My mind was reeling. No one told me anything. Taylor cleared her throat uncomfortably beside me. "Perhaps I should give you some privacy." "No," I said firmly, not taking my eyes off Natalie. "You're here as a witness. This is the property I've hired you to manage." Natalie's eyes flicked to Taylor, then back to me. "Well, come in, I guess. It's your house, right?" Her tone had an edge of defiance. I stepped inside, with Taylor following hesitantly. The house smelled different, a mixture of breakfast cereal, children's shampoo, and scented candles. Natalie had clearly made herself at home. Emma, my 8-year-old niece, emerged from the kitchen, a bowl of cereal in her hands. Her eyes widened. "Uncle Chester," she exclaimed, genuinely happy to see me. She put her bowl down and ran to hug me, Despite my anger, I returned the embrace. "Hey, Emma Bear," I said, using my old nickname for her. "You've grown so much." Jacob, the middle child at 6 years old, appeared at the top of the stairs, curious about the commotion. "Who's that?" he asked, not recognizing me after so long. "That's your Uncle Chester," Natalie said, her tone now tense. "Kids, go upstairs for a bit while we talk." But Mom Emma began to protest. "Now please," Natalie said firmly. As the children reluctantly disappeared upstairs, I turned to Natalie, struggling to keep my voice level. "I need an explanation. Right now." Natalie crossed her arms. "What's there to explain? I needed a place to stay after Kevin, and I split up. The house was sitting empty. Mom and Dad gave me permission." "Permission?" I felt heat rising in my face. "They can't give permission for a house they don't own." "I own this house, Natalie." "Well, you weren't using it," she said dismissively. "It seems pretty selfish to let it sit empty when your own sister and her kids needed a home." "Selfish?" I was dumbfounded. "You moved into my house without asking me, changed the locks, and I'm the selfish one?" Taylor shifted uncomfortably beside me. "Mr. Davidson, perhaps we should reschedule." "You know what, Chester?" Natalie interrupted, her voice rising. "If you have such a problem with it, why don't you call the police? Have your own sister and her kids thrown out on the street. That would make you feel big, wouldn't it?" The challenge hung in the air between us. I looked around at the evidence of their lives here. School books on the dining table, children's artwork magnetized to the refrigerator, family photos I wasn't in displayed on the mantel. They had clearly been here for months. "Then I will," I said, my voice low and controlled despite the rage building inside me. "If that's what it takes." The color drained from Natalie's face. She clearly hadn't expected me to call her bluff. "You wouldn't," she said, but uncertainty had replaced her defiance. "I'm going outside to call our parents," I said, turning toward the door. "Then I'm calling my lawyer. You have until tomorrow to explain to me exactly how this happened, or I'll be filing formal eviction proceedings." As I stepped outside, I heard Natalie's voice behind me, the panic now evident. "Chester, wait. Let's talk about this." But I kept walking. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone to call the people who had apparently betrayed me just as much as my sister had. With Taylor waiting awkwardly by her car, I stood in the driveway and dialed my father's number. He answered on the third ring. "Chester? This is unexpected," he said, his voice guarded. "I'm at the house in Lexington," I said without preamble. "Care to explain why Natalie and her kids are living here?" There was a pause, then a heavy sigh. "We were going to tell you." "When?" I demanded. "She's clearly been here for months. The locks are changed. There's a garden planted. The kids look settled." "Keep your voice down," my father said, his tone hardening. "You're overreacting as usual." "Overreacting? This is my property, Dad. My house. The one Grandma and Grandpa left to me. And what were you doing with it?" "Nothing. Letting it sit there while your sister struggled to keep a roof over her children's heads." I could hear my mother in the background asking for the phone. After some muffled discussion, she came on the line. "Chester, honey," she began in her placating nurse voice. "I know this is a shock, but try to understand. Natalie was in a terrible situation after Kevin left. He hasn't been reliable with child support, and she lost her job at the dental office. We were helping as much as we could, but our retirement savings can only stretch so far." "So you gave her my house without asking me?" I asked incredulously. We thought you wouldn't mind," she said, her voice small. "You have your life in Chicago. You visit maybe once a year. The house was just sitting there. That doesn't make it okay to give away something that isn't yours to give," I insisted. "You know how Natalie is with money. Has she been paying the property taxes? The utilities?" More silence. "That's what I thought," I continued. "So not only did you give her my house without permission, but you've also let me keep paying all the expenses. We've been helping with the bills," my mother defended weakly. "I can't believe this," I said, running a hand through my hair in frustration. "Did it even occur to you to call me? To ask?" My father came back on the phone. "We knew what you'd say. You've become so cold, Chester, so wrapped up in your big city life and your money. You've forgotten what family means. Those words stung, especially coming from the man who had taught me the importance of responsibility. That's not fair. I've always helped when I could. I only stopped when Natalie committed literal fraud against me. Ancient history, my father dismissed. She was desperate, and she's still desperate apparently. Desperate enough to steal my house. She didn't steal anything. She needed help and we helped her. That's what family does. I'm coming over tonight, I said firmly. We need to talk about this in person. All of us. Fine, he agreed curtly. Dinner at 6. He hung up without saying goodbye. I stood there for a moment, phone in hand, trying to process the conversation. The sense of betrayal was overwhelming. My own parents had given away my property without so much as a text message to let me know. Taylor approached cautiously. Mr. Davidson, should I come back another time? I had almost forgotten she was there. I'm sorry about this, Taylor. Yes, let's reschedule. Obviously, I need to sort out a family situation before we can proceed with any rental plans. She nodded understandingly. Family matters can be complicated. Here's my card. Call me when you're ready to move forward. She hesitated, then added, For what it's worth, tenant law in Massachusetts is quite complex, even with family members. You might want to consult an attorney. I thanked her and watched as she drove away, leaving me alone in the driveway of a house that was legally mine but no longer felt like it. Taking a deep breath, I headed back inside. Natalie was sitting on the living room sofa, her posture tense. The children were nowhere to be seen, but I could hear them playing upstairs. I just spoke to Mom and Dad, I said, keeping my voice even. I'll be having dinner with them tonight to discuss this situation. Natalie looked up, her eyes red-rimmed but defiant. They said I could stay here, Chester. I didn't just break in. That wasn't their decision to make, I replied, sitting in the armchair across from her. This house belongs to me, Natalie. Legally. They had no right to offer it to you. Where were we supposed to go? She asked, her voice cracking slightly. After Kevin left, everything fell apart. He drained our bank account, left me with all the bills. I lost the apartment because I couldn't make rent. The kids had already changed schools once that year. Despite my anger, I felt a twinge of sympathy. Why didn't you call me? Why go behind my back like this? She laughed bitterly. Call you? After you cut me off completely? You made it clear 2 years ago that you were done helping me. I cut you off financially after you committed credit card fraud in my name, I reminded her. That doesn't mean I wouldn't have helped you find a legitimate solution for housing. Would you, though? She challenged. You've been so judgmental about every choice I've made. Always looking down on me from your perfect life, with your perfect job and perfect girlfriend. I sighed heavily. My life isn't perfect, Natalie. I work 70-hour weeks. I've sacrificed a lot to build financial security. Well, some of us don't have that luxury, she snapped. Some of us have 3 kids to feed and clothe and no fancy degree to fall back on. The children appeared at the bottom of the stairs, drawn by the raised voices. Emma looked anxious, holding Tyler's hand. Jacob stood slightly apart, watching me warily. Seeing them softened something in me. They were innocent in all this. Hey guys, I said, forcing a smile. Sorry about the commotion. I was just surprised to see you all here. Are you going to make us leave? Emma asked directly, her young face serious. Before I could answer, Natalie interrupted. No one's making anyone leave today. Uncle Chester and I are just having a grown-up discussion. I held my tongue, not wanting to argue in front of the children. I need to go check into my hotel and make some calls, I said, standing up. Natalie, we're not done with this conversation. You have 1 week to explain yourself honestly, including your financial situation, how long you've been here, and what arrangements you've made with Mom and Dad. Then we can discuss next steps. 1 week? She repeated incredulously. What happens after a week? That depends entirely on how truthful and cooperative you decide to be, I said, heading for the door. I'll be back tomorrow after I speak with our parents. As I left, I heard Tyler ask, Mommy, why is Uncle Chester mad? And it broke my heart a little. This mess wasn't his fault, or any of the children's, but it couldn't continue. Instead of driving directly to a hotel, I found myself heading to a local coffee shop to clear my head. As I sat with an untouched latte, I called Melissa to fill her in on the situation. "That's unbelievable," she said after listening to my account. "Your parents really overstepped." "I know. I feel betrayed by all of them." "What are you going to do?" she asked. I sighed heavily. "I don't know yet. I can't just throw Natalie and the kids out on the street, but I can't let this stand either. She needs to understand that actions have consequences." "Just be careful," Melissa advised. "Family conflicts can get messy fast. Remember, those kids are your niece and nephews." Her words stayed with me as I checked into the Lexington Inn for what promised to be a very long week. The next morning, I texted my childhood friend Anthony, who still lived in the area. We arranged to meet for lunch at Margie's Diner, a local spot we'd frequented in high school. I needed perspective from someone who knew my family, but wasn't emotionally involved in the current drama. Anthony looked much the same as he had in our younger days, just with less hair and more weight around the middle. He greeted me with a bear hug and a concerned expression. "Man, you look like hell," he observed as we slid into a booth. "Feel like it too," I admitted. "Did you know Natalie was living in my grandparents' house?" He winced. "Yeah, I'd heard rumors. Saw her at the grocery store a few months back with the kids. She mentioned staying at the family place but didn't elaborate. I figured you knew." "Well, I didn't," I said, then filled him in on yesterday's discovery. Anthony whistled low. "That's messed up, Chester. But honestly, not entirely surprising given your family history." "What do you mean?" He looked uncomfortable. "Come on, man. Natalie has always been the golden child. Remember when she wrecked your car senior year and your parents bought her a new one while you took the bus to work?" I did remember. I had saved for 2 years to buy that used Honda, only for Natalie to borrow it without permission and wrap it around a tree. My parents had been so relieved she wasn't hurt that they never addressed the theft aspect, and somehow I ended up being told I should have been more generous about sharing. "Or what about your college graduation?" Anthony continued. "When your whole family showed up 3 hours late because Natalie had a minor fender bender on the way. They missed your summa cum laude recognition, man." That memory still stung. I'd worked incredibly hard for that honor, and my family had seen only the last 10 minutes of the 4-hour ceremony. "It's always been this way," I acknowledged. "I'm held to a different standard than she is." "Because you can handle it," Anthony said, mimicking what my parents had told me countless times. "Because you're the responsible one." We ordered lunch, and Anthony shared what he knew about Natalie's situation. Her ex-husband, Kevin, had apparently left town with a waitress from the local sports bar, leaving Natalie with massive debt and 3 children to support alone. She'd lost her job as a dental receptionist shortly after. "Not that I'm defending her moving into your place without permission," Anthony clarified, "but she was in a bad spot. She could have called me," I insisted. Instead, she went behind my back. "Would you have let her stay if she'd asked?" he challenged. I hesitated. "I don't know. Maybe temporarily, with clear terms. But that's not the point. The point is, she didn't ask." Anthony nodded. "Fair enough." After lunch, I drove to my parents' house in Woburn, steeling myself for what promised to be an uncomfortable dinner. The modest split level looked exactly as it had during my childhood. Same beige siding, same rhododendron bushes flanking the steps. My mother answered the door, immediately pulling me into a tight hug as though nothing was wrong. "Chester, it's so good to see you. Come in, come in. Dad's watching the game, but dinner's almost ready." The familiar smell of her pot roast filled the house. A calculated move, I was sure. It had always been my favorite. My father looked up briefly from the television as I entered the living room. "Chester," he acknowledged with a nod before returning his attention to the basketball game. Dinner began in awkward silence. My mother made several attempts at small talk, asking about my flight, my work, Melissa, until I finally put down my fork. "Can we address the elephant in the room? You gave Natalie permission to live in my house without telling me." My father's jaw tightened. "We did what we had to do for family." It wasn't yours to give, I repeated for what felt like the 100th time. You abandoned that house, he said accusingly. Visit once a year at most, while it sits there empty. I didn't abandon anything. I've maintained it, paid the taxes, kept the utilities on. That's called being a responsible property owner. While your sister and her children were about to be homeless, my mother interjected, her voice quavering. What were we supposed to do, Chester? Call me, I said emphatically. Tell me what was happening. Ask if I could help. Any of those would have been better than going behind my back. We knew what you'd say, my father retorted. Ever since that credit card business, you've been cold toward Natalie. You wouldn't have helped. You don't know that because you never gave me the chance, I argued. And even if I had said no, that would have been my right. It's my house. Your grandfather would be ashamed, my father said, his voice low and cutting. He didn't leave you that house so you could hoard it while family suffered. That hit below the belt. Don't you dare tell me what Grandpa would think, I said, my voice shaking with anger. He left me that house because he knew I would respect it. He also taught me about honesty and respect for other people's property. Lessons that seemed to have been lost on this family. My mother began to cry. We were desperate, Chester. Natalie showed up on our doorstep with 3 children and nowhere to go. We've been helping financially for years, but we're on a fixed income now. The house seemed like the perfect solution. So you gave her a key? Just like that? My parents exchanged a glance. Actually, my father admitted reluctantly, she already had a key, from when she used to check on the place for you. That was years ago, before our falling out. I had asked Natalie to check on the house occasionally when she still lived nearby, but I thought she'd returned the key when she moved. Did you at least discuss expectations with her? Rent? Utilities? Another uncomfortable glance between them. We've been helping with the utilities, my mother said. The understanding was that she would get back on her feet and eventually find her own place. And when was that supposed to happen? It's been how long now? 6 months? About that, my father confirmed. Since December. 6 months. For 6 months, they had kept this secret from me. Did it ever occur to you to tell me my sister was getting divorced? I asked, the hurt evident in my voice. That my niece and nephews were going through such upheaval? You made it clear you wanted distance from Natalie, my mother said defensively. We were respecting that. Distance from financial exploitation, not from important family news. I pushed back from the table. I would have wanted to know that. I would have wanted to help the kids, at least. You're always so judgmental, my father said, his own anger rising, looking down on Natalie from your high horse. Not everyone can have your perfect life, Chester. My life isn't perfect, Dad. I've worked damned hard for everything I have. Natalie has made one bad decision after another, and everyone excuses it because she's had it rough. Well, guess what? Life is rough sometimes. That doesn't give her the right to take what isn't hers. She needed help, my mother cried. Then you should have helped her yourselves instead of offering up my property, I shouted, finally losing my composure. Or called me, or helped her apply for assistance programs. Literally anything else would have been more appropriate. I stood up, unable to continue the conversation. I can't do this right now. You both know what happened was wrong, but you're so used to making excuses for Natalie that you can't admit it. Where are you going? My mother asked, alarmed. Back to my hotel. I need to think. Chester, please, she pleaded. We're family. We can work this out. Family doesn't go behind each other's backs, I said, heading for the door. Family doesn't steal from each other. Family respects boundaries. I left without looking back, my father's parting shot following me out. You've changed, Chester. Chicago has made you cold. As I drove away, I realized with painful clarity that they had never respected my ownership of the house. In their minds, it was still family property that I was selfishly controlling. No wonder they felt justified in giving it to Natalie. The question now was what to do about it. The next day, I decided to return to the house to have a more thorough conversation with Natalie. I needed to understand exactly what she had been told and what her plans were. When I pulled up around 11 in the morning, I was surprised to see 3 cars in the driveway besides Natalie's old Subaru. I rang the doorbell, and after a moment, Natalie answered, looking flustered, "Oh, Chester, I didn't expect you today." From inside, I could hear women's voices and laughter. "Is this a bad time?" I asked, though I didn't particularly care if it was. "I have some friends over," she admitted reluctantly. "A weekly coffee thing we do." "I think this conversation takes precedence over coffee with friends," I said firmly, stepping past her into the hallway. In the living room, my living room, sat two women approximately Natalie's age, comfortably ensconced on my grandparents' sofa with coffee mugs and plates of pastries. They looked up with curiosity as I entered. "This is my brother, Chester," Natalie explained, her tone tense. "Chester, these are my friends, Lauren and Heather." Both women gave me cold looks. I had the distinct impression they already knew who I was and had heard Natalie's version of events. "Nice to meet you," I said without much sincerity. "I need to speak with my sister privately." Lauren, a thin woman with an aggressively short haircut, made no move to leave. "We know all about the situation, Chester. Natalie has nothing to hide from us." "Be that as it may," I replied evenly. "This is a family matter." Heather, who was heavier with dyed red hair, stood up. "Come on, Lauren. Let's give them some space. We'll check on you later, Nat." The pointed look she gave me made it clear that checking in would happen very soon after they left. Once they were gone, I surveyed the room more carefully. What I saw troubled me deeply. Mail was stacked on the entry table, addressed to Natalie at this address, some of it dating back months. Family photos had been arranged on the walls, replacing some of my grandparents' art. A large bookshelf that had once held my grandfather's history book collection now displayed children's books and decorative items. "You've been here a while," I observed. Natalie crossed her arms defensively. "Since December, I told you that, and you've clearly made yourself quite at home." I moved through the house, taking inventory of the changes. The dining room now had a children's art station set up in one corner. The study had been converted into what appeared to be a bedroom for Jacob, with sports posters on the walls and toys scattered across the floor. But what really stopped me in my tracks was the condition of my grandmother's china cabinet in the formal dining room. The beautiful cherry wood piece had been painted a chalky white, and several of the delicate china pieces inside, passed down through generations, were missing. "What happened to Grandma's china?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Natalie shifted uncomfortably. "The kids broke a few pieces accidentally. They were playing, and a ball hit the cabinet." "So you painted a 200-year-old cherry cabinet? White?" She shrugged. "It looks more modern now." The dark wood was depressing. Something snapped inside me. "You had no right to alter anything in this house, Natalie. This isn't yours. It's just paint, Chester. It can be stripped if you care that much." "That's not the point. You've been acting like you own this place. You've moved in, redecorated, invited your friends over to treat it like it's your home." "It is my home," she shouted back. "Maybe not legally on paper, but it's more my home than yours. You abandoned it." "I did not abandon anything," I said through gritted teeth. "I've maintained this property, paid every bill, kept it in the family, while you live your perfect life in Chicago," she spat. "Some of us don't have that luxury. Some of us have real problems. And some of us make responsible choices," I countered. "Your real problems are largely of your own making, Natalie." Her eyes flashed with anger. "You heartless jerk. Not everyone gets the opportunities you've had. We had the exact same opportunities. Same parents, same schools, same chance at college. I worked my way through school while you partied and dropped out. I built a career while you bounced from job to job. I saved money while you racked up debt. You don't know anything about my life," she said bitterly. "You have no idea what it's like to be a single mother of 3. "You're right, I don't," I conceded. "But I do know what it's like to have family members who take advantage of you repeatedly, who steal from you, who go behind your back." The children had appeared at the top of the stairs, drawn by our raised voices. Emma looked close to tears. Jacob glared at me with hostility, while Tyler just looked confused. "Kids, go back upstairs," Natalie ordered, her voice shaking. "Why is Uncle Chester yelling at you?" Jacob demanded, not moving. "Because your uncle only cares about money and things," Natalie said loudly, making no attempt to shield them from the conflict. "Not about family." That was a low blow, using the children as emotional leverage. That's not true, I said, modulating my tone. I care very much about family that respects each other. Respect? Natalie laughed harshly. You want to throw your sister and her children out on the street and call it respect? I never said. You'll have to drag us out, she continued, playing to the children. Call the police on your own flesh and blood. Stop it, Natalie, I warned. Don't manipulate the kids like this. I walked into the kitchen to collect myself, and that's when I saw it. A stack of papers on the counter next to Natalie's laptop. Legal documents. I shouldn't have looked, but something compelled me to glance at the top page. It was a letter from an attorney regarding challenging the Davidson estate distribution. My blood ran cold. I picked up the papers and scanned them quickly. Natalie had been consulting with a lawyer about contesting our grandparents' will, nearly 5 years after the fact, claiming that the house should have been distributed equally between us. Natalie appeared in the doorway, saw what I was looking at, and lunged to grab the papers. Those are private. You're trying to challenge the will? I asked incredulously. After all this time? She snatched the papers away. I was just exploring my options. Your options? I repeated. Your option is to accept that this house legally belongs to me, and that you're living here only by my grace at this point. Grace? She scoffed. You didn't even know I was here until 2 days ago. Because you and our parents conspired to keep it from me, I shouted. And now I find out you've been planning to try to take the house legally, after moving in without permission, after damaging family heirlooms and changing locks. This should have been half mine to begin with, she insisted. Grandma and Grandpa played favorites, just like Mom and Dad always did, only they favored you instead of me for once. The accusation was so ludicrous I almost laughed. Played favorites? I spent every weekend with them while you couldn't be bothered to visit. I helped Grandpa with his physical therapy after his stroke. I drove Grandma to her doctor's appointments. Where were you for any of that? I had my own life. And later, I had children to take care of. Exactly. You made your choices. I made mine. They left me the house because I was the one who cared for them and the property. That's not fair, she insisted. Life isn't fair, I shot back. But you know what's really unfair? You telling everyone in town that I abandoned this property so you could claim it. You letting your kids believe this house will be theirs someday. Her expression confirmed my suspicion. You've been telling them that, haven't you? That this is their permanent home? She didn't answer, which was answer enough. This stops now, I said with quiet intensity. I'm calling my lawyer today. You'll be receiving formal eviction papers. You wouldn't, she gasped. Watch me. You've been manipulating this situation from the start. I might have been willing to work something out if you'd been honest. But this, I gestured to the legal papers. This crosses a line. The children will be my primary concern, I interrupted. I'll make sure they have safe housing. But it won't be here, and it won't be under these false pretenses. I pulled out my phone and took photos of the legal documents despite Natalie's protests. Then I headed for the door. You have 30 days, I said over my shoulder. I suggest you start packing and looking for a new place to live. You'll regret this, she called after me, her voice cracking with emotion. Mom and Dad will never forgive you. As I got into my rental car, I could hear the children crying inside the house. It broke my heart, but I couldn't back down now. Natalie had gone too far. And if I didn't establish clear boundaries, this pattern would never end. Sitting in my car, I called a local attorney who specialized in landlord-tenant law and made an appointment for that afternoon. Then I texted Anthony, "It's worse than I thought. Need a drink later." The situation had escalated beyond anything I could have imagined, and there would be no easy resolution, but I was done being manipulated and taken advantage of by my own family. Back in my hotel room that evening, I lay on the bed staring at the ceiling, mentally and emotionally exhausted. My meeting with Sarah Blackwell, the real estate attorney, had been informative but troubling. Massachusetts tenant law was complicated, and even though Natalie had no legal right to be in the house, evicting her would be messy, potentially damaging to the children, and would permanently fracture our family. My phone rang. Melissa calling for our evening check-in. "Hey," I answered, not bothering to hide my weariness. "That bad, huh?" she asked sympathetically. I filled her in on the day's discoveries. The altered heirlooms, the legal consultation, the children being drawn into the conflict. Oh, Chester, she sighed. What a nightmare. I don't know what to do, Mel. On one hand, I'm furious and want to stand my ground. On the other, those kids. My voice trailed off. Those kids are innocent, she finished for me. And they're your family too. Exactly. But if I back down now, what message does that send? That anyone can take advantage of me and I'll just accept it? That there are no consequences for Natalie's actions? Melissa was quiet for a moment. What if you looked for a third option? Something that establishes your boundaries but doesn't punish the children. Like what? I don't know exactly. But there has to be a middle ground between letting Natalie stay consequence-free and putting 3 kids through a traumatic eviction. After we hung up, I sat with that thought. A third option, something that would protect the children while still holding Natalie accountable. The next morning, I met with Julian Matthews, my financial advisor who happened to be in Boston for a conference. Over breakfast at the hotel restaurant, I outlined the situation. Financially, what are my options here? I asked after bringing him up to speed. Julian considered this thoughtfully. Several, actually. You could sell the property and use some of the proceeds to help your sister find suitable housing, perhaps with a structured arrangement where payments go directly to a landlord rather than to her. That would solve the immediate problem, I acknowledged, but I'm not sure I'm ready to sell a family property with so much history and meaning. Alternatively, Julian continued, you could formalize a rental agreement with your sister, below market rate, but with strict conditions regarding property maintenance, timely partial rent payments, and perhaps financial counseling. She's proven herself untrustworthy, I pointed out. What's to stop her from violating any agreement we make? Legal consequences clearly spelled out in the agreement, he replied. And perhaps a third-party guarantor or co-signer, though I gather your parents might not be ideal for that role. As we were discussing options, my phone rang with an unknown local number. I excused myself to answer it. Is this Chester Davidson? A male voice asked. Yes. Who's calling? This is Kevin Travers, Natalie's ex-husband. I understand there's a situation with the house. I was momentarily stunned. How did you get my number? Your mother gave it to me, he said. Look, I know we've never met, but I think we should talk. Natalie called me last night in hysterics about you evicting her and the kids. I agreed to meet him that afternoon at a coffee shop near his workplace in Cambridge. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I wanted to hear his perspective. Kevin turned out to be different from what I'd imagined based on Natalie's descriptions. He was clean-cut, articulate, and seemed genuinely concerned about his children. After awkward introductions, we got straight to the point. I want to be clear, he began, that I never abandoned my family, despite what Natalie might have told you. Our marriage fell apart, yes, but I've been fighting for fair custody and visitation since day one. She implied you left them without support, I said carefully. Kevin sighed heavily. I've never missed a child support payment. Not once. I have the records to prove it. Natalie has consistently interfered with my court-ordered visitation and poisoned the kids against me. This didn't align with the story I'd heard from my parents and Natalie. If that's true, why haven't you taken legal action? I have, he said, pulling out his phone and showing me court documents. I've been back to family court 3 times in the past 2 years. The latest hearing is next month. Natalie keeps finding ways to delay and obstruct. As Kevin shared more details about their divorce and the aftermath, a clearer picture emerged. One of Natalie is not just a victim of circumstances, but as someone who manipulated situations to her advantage and used the children as pawns. Don't get me wrong, Kevin added, seeing my expression. I'm not claiming to be perfect. Our marriage had real problems on both sides, but the narrative that I abandoned them is simply false. Why are you telling me all this? I asked. He looked me straight in the eyes. Because those are my kids too, and I care what happens to them. Natalie creates chaos and instability in their lives. They need structure and consistency. What would you suggest I do about the house situation? Honestly, I think you need to set firm boundaries with Natalie. She responds to clear consequences, not to generosity. She just sees that as weakness to exploit. He paused. But whatever you do, please consider the impact on Emma, Jacob, and Tyler. They're caught in the middle of adult problems they didn't create. After meeting with Kevin, I drove around town for a while, thinking. The complexity of the situation had deepened, but so had my resolve to find a solution that was both just and compassionate. That evening, I researched affordable housing options in the area. Massachusetts had several programs for single parents, including some with supportive services that might benefit Natalie. I also looked into family therapy resources, wondering if professional help might facilitate healing for all of us. On a recommendation from Sarah Blackwell, I consulted with Dr. Marcus Reynolds, a family therapist who specialized in high-conflict situations. His insights were valuable. "From what you're describing," he said after I outlined the situation, "your sister displays patterns consistent with entitled dependency. She's learned that manipulation and victimhood get her needs met." "That sounds accurate," I agreed. "But how do I break that pattern without causing further harm, especially to the children?" "Clear boundaries with compassionate support," he advised. "Make it clear what you will and won't tolerate, but also offer concrete assistance that empowers rather than enables." By the end of the week, I had developed a structured plan. It wasn't perfect, and it would require significant compromise from all parties, but it offered a path forward that I could live with morally and emotionally. The plan included a 3-month timeline for Natalie to find new housing, with my financial assistance for the security deposit and first month's rent, continued occupancy of the Lexington house during that period, contingent on proper care of the property, and weekly progress updates on her housing search, financial counseling as a condition of my assistance, a commitment from me to establish an education fund for Emma, Jacob, and Tyler, regular visitation rights for me with my niece and nephews, a request that my parents contribute to the transition plan if they wished to be involved. It wouldn't be easy, and I had no illusions that Natalie would embrace it immediately. But it was a solution I could stand behind, one that recognized my legal rights while acknowledging my moral responsibility to family. Armed with this plan, I scheduled a final meeting at the house with Natalie, prepared for whatever reaction might come. When I arrived at the house for our final meeting, Natalie was alone. The children were at school, which was for the best. This conversation needed to happen between adults, without emotional manipulation, using the kids as shields. She let me in silently, her posture defensive but less hostile than before. The house was noticeably tidier, and I spotted boxes in the corner. She had at least begun the process of sorting belongings. "I've been thinking a lot about this situation," I began, sitting at the kitchen table, "about our family history, about the kids, about what's fair to everyone involved." Natalie remained standing, arms crossed. And I'm not going to file formal eviction proceedings," I said calmly. Her posture relaxed slightly, relief evident in her face. "So we can stay?" "Temporarily with conditions," I clarified, and proceeded to outline my proposal. As I expected, she initially balked at the financial counseling requirement and the 3-month timeline. "That's not enough time to find a decent place," she protested. "It is if you actively search and are realistic about what you can afford," I countered. "I've researched housing in this area extensively. There are options within your budget, especially with the assistance I'm offering. And if I refuse your conditions, then we go back to the legal route," I said firmly. "These terms are more than fair, Natalie. They address your needs while respecting my property rights." She was quiet for a long moment, considering. "What about the kids' school? They're settled here. The districts I've identified would keep them in the same schools," I assured her. I thought of that. Another long pause. Then, unexpectedly, her eyes filled with tears. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice small. "After everything I did, moving in without permission, altering the house, the legal consultation, you'd still help us? Because you're my sister, and those children are my family," I said simply. "And because despite everything, I don't believe you acted out of malice. You were desperate and made poor choices." She sank into a chair across from me. "I was so angry with you," she admitted, "for having it all together, for inheriting the house, for cutting me off financially. It felt good to take something from you for once. Her honesty, however painful, was a step in the right direction. I understand that anger, I said. But Natalie, you've been angry at the wrong things. I worked hard for what I have. The house came to me because I maintained a relationship with Grandma and Grandpa. I know, she said quietly. Deep down, I've always known that. It was easier to blame you than to face my own mistakes. That admission opened the door to the most honest conversation we'd had in years. For the next 2 hours, we talked through resentments and misunderstandings that had festered between us since childhood. I learned about her struggles with depression after each child was born, her feelings of inadequacy compared to me, her genuine difficulties navigating single parenthood. In turn, I shared how hurt I'd been by her credit card fraud, her dismissal of my work ethic as luck, and the way she'd turned our parents against me over the years. I never meant to come between you and Mom and Dad, she said, though we both knew that wasn't entirely true. Regardless, we need to establish healthier patterns, I insisted. All of us. By the time the children came home from school, we had reached an agreement that both of us could live with. Natalie would accept my terms, and I would help ensure the transition was as smooth as possible for Emma, Jacob, and Tyler. That evening, I invited our parents over and presented the plan to them. My father was initially resistant, seeing it as me asserting control rather than helping. This is still me forcing Natalie out, he argued. Just with a nicer package. No, Dad, I corrected him. This is me establishing boundaries while still being compassionate. There's a difference. My mother, more practical, focused on the logistics. Where will they go? What about the children's routines? I walked them through the research I'd done on housing options and support services. I've thought this through carefully, but I need your support, not your undermining. After much discussion and some lingering tension, they reluctantly agreed that my solution was reasonable. More importantly, they acknowledged their role in enabling the situation. We should have talked to you first, my mother admitted. We were trying to help one child without considering the impact on the other. We've always expected more from you because you seemed capable of handling it, my father added. That wasn't always fair. It wasn't a perfect reconciliation, but it was a start. The next 6 months were challenging as we implemented the plan. Natalie found a 3-bedroom apartment about 15 minutes from the Lexington house, in a good school district with affordable rent. With my help for the deposit and first month, she was able to secure a lease. The financial counseling was a struggle at first. Natalie resisted having someone scrutinize her spending habits. But gradually, she began to see the value in budgeting and planning. She found a new job as an administrative assistant at a local community college, which offered tuition benefits she could potentially use to complete her degree. As for the house, I ultimately decided that selling was the best option. The property held too many complicated emotions now. After some renovations to restore my grandmother's china cabinet and address other changes Natalie had made, I listed it with Taylor from Better Homes Realty. The sale closed quickly, and while most of the proceeds went toward my future with Melissa, I set aside a significant portion for education funds for Emma, Jacob, and Tyler. Whatever issues existed between the adults in the family, the children deserved a chance at opportunity. My relationship with my niece and nephews improved dramatically once the housing conflict was resolved. I made regular visits to their new apartment, took them for outings, and established myself as a consistent presence in their lives. Emma, in particular, seemed to thrive with this additional support, showing an interest in finance that reminded me of myself at her age. The healing with my parents took longer. Years of patterns don't change overnight, but our conversations became more honest, less layered with unspoken resentments. They began to acknowledge Natalie's responsibility for her choices, rather than reflexively defending her or expecting me to fix everything. A year after the discovery that had upended everything, Melissa and I were married in Chicago. My entire family attended. Parents, Natalie, the children, even Kevin, who had successfully gained more consistent visitation rights. The dynamics were different now, more balanced. I felt respected in a way I hadn't before. Life lessons rarely come easily, and this one had been particularly painful. I learned that family loyalty doesn't mean abandoning personal boundaries. That helping someone doesn't always mean giving them what they want. That patterns established in childhood can persist into adulthood unless consciously addressed. Most importantly, I learned that true compassion includes accountability. By holding Natalie responsible while still offering support, I gave her the opportunity to grow rather than remain dependent. The path to healing our family lay not in endless accommodation, but in honest communication and appropriate boundaries. As I look back now, I realize that what started as a property dispute was really about much deeper issues: respect, responsibility, and the complicated bonds of family. Our grandparents' house wasn't just a physical structure, it was a symbol of our family legacy and the values we claim to uphold. In the end, the question wasn't really about who deserved to live in that house. It was about what kind of family we wanted to be going forward. The answer required sacrifice and growth from all of us, but the relationships we've rebuilt are stronger for having weathered the storm. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members? What did you learn from the experience? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more real-life stories about navigating complex family dynamics. Your support means the world to me. And remember, sometimes the hardest conversations lead to the most meaningful growth. Thank you for listening, and I wish you strength and wisdom in your own family journeys.